Hi folks, and welcome to Community Pulse. I'm your host, Brian Lamour. On today's show, we're talking about an interesting book. It's called Shot in Montana. It's a book about all the movies that have been shot in Montana, over 100 of them. They all have a little write-up in them. Today we'll be talking about a number of them, plus movies that are being shot on TV, or being shot in Montana right now. Of course, we have a wonderful guest. We have Brian D'Ambrosia. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And we have your daughter.
This is Sophia. Yeah, Sophia's here.
Sophia, hi. It's great to have you all here.
It's nice to be back too. It's been several years, so it's good to see you again.
Yes, you've been a prolific author in the time, but we're talking about Shot in Montana, history of big sky cinema. What was the idea that first got you thinking that, we need to do a summary of the movies that have been in Montana?
Well, in the early, I'd say about 2010, 2011, had the chance to go on several movie sets and also write about several productions that were going on in the state. And at that time, I started to look back into folders at the film office of older movies. And then I gathered a little database. I started made a little map of where things were filmed and where they were located. And then started compiling other movies from the 70s and looking further and further back. And then I lined them up, juxtaposed them, started looking at clippings, old newspaper articles, files and folders, and I said, well, there hasn't been a book about the history of movies in Montana, so I wanted to make sure that there was enough material, and there certainly was an abundance of material. I also wanted to make sure that there were enough photos, most of which have never been seen before. I went down into the film office basement and I found boxes and boxes of old slides that I had processed from old movies. In fact, I found slides from the moment the Paris Gibson High School was blown up in the Charles Bronson spy thriller Telefon. So that piqued started to increase my appetite and increase my interest. And I also found some just amazing photos of Jack Nicholson on the set of the Missouri Breaks when he was in the badlands of eastern Montana. So all of that kind of came to galvanize into this book.
Oh, that's fascinating.
So I'm quite proud of it. I think the state's quite proud of it. I think movies are a source of community pride and civic pride, and I think everyone has like a memory that's attached to a movie, whether a friend was an extra in it, or a family member, or they knew somebody, or they met an actor while they were watching the film. So I think that it conjures up some really fabulous memories and positive memories, and it's just a beautiful industry, and it seems like every film has left a wonderful kind of cheerful imprint.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. But now, we talk about movies in Montana, but Montana's been in a number of movies, and the scenery has imitated a lot other nations and countries. Can you tell us more about those?
Yeah, that's true. That's one of the interesting things, that Montana has served as a doppelganger for many far-flung places and locations, from Morocco to Norway. There was a film called 1,000 Pieces of Gold, where Montana served as about 15 different places, including Mongolia and San Francisco. Butte doubled in as San Francisco behind the Peking in an alleyway, and other parts, like by Livingston, mirrored and mimicked the scenery of Mongolia. So I thought that was really, really fascinating. So that was one of the things I tried to emphasize, was all the places that Montana has served as, whether an Arctic snowpack in Firefox, or it served in the film Josh and Sam, more than 90 locations, including Calgary, Los Angeles, and this was all filmed in Billings. So I thought that was really interesting. So I thought the duplicates and the doppelgangers and all the locations that Montana has filled in makes it quite interesting too. And virtually every terrain, except for desert or ocean, are available here to film, which makes it such a diverse kind of filming location as far as topography, and geography and scenery.
Oh, that's neat. But now, you're talking over 100 different movies in this book. What was maybe the first one that was shot in Montana?
Well, it looks like there was a travel documentary in the late 1890s called Last Train to Livingston, which is one that I had found. There were several railroad movies too, old railroading flicks that were done in the 20s and 30s. One called Danger Lights. Several other productions in the 40s and 50s, but it looks like there was actually an actor. There was a gentleman named Wallace Coburn who started a movie company. He was a Montana native from Malta. And in the 1910, 1915, he had a movie house that he was running up in Zortman. So I knew nothing about Wallace Coburn. I knew nothing about the film company until researching this book. So Wallace ended up in California, and he ended up living his life out there. But his daughter, Dorothy, was born in Great Falls, but was raised in Prescott and also in California. She went on to become a Hal Roach favorite. She was used in many Laurel and Hardy movies and skits too. So there's this there's always this quirky little history, I think, that has been kind of lost, that I had the power and the influence and the experience to retell. So that's part of what I enjoyed the most, was retelling a lot of these forgotten characters or forgotten scenes or forgotten locations and locales. So.
Yeah. Well, one of them has to be The Patriot. It was filmed in Ennis in 1998, and what happened in the background didn't make it onto the movie, but it was a fascinating story.
That's true. Well, Steven Seagal filmed that at his own ranch in Ennis, and the plot essentially has the militia of Montana unleashing like biological spores on the town of Ennis Place itself. The militia of Montana, some of the members heard about the plot, and without actually knowing what was going on in the film, they infiltrated the set. They actually called up several times and started threatening the set. They threatened to contaminate the food, and they actually did send in extras too. So what was happening was, when the casting directors and the casting personnel were meeting with extras, they were trying to vet them because they thought that they could have been from the militia, and turns out in many cases they were, where someone would come to the set and they would make a great extra, but they would refuse to produce their social security number, for example. So the FBI was called in, and they were actually on the set of the shooting of The Patriot. Yeah. So yeah, another wild story. So yeah.
Yeah, and how did that contribute to the financial stability of the firm?
The film actually was a terrible flop for Seagal. And it was actually in debt to a bonding company at the time. So the movie had racked up massive amounts of debt. So when a movie goes into so much debt, it ends up becoming property of a bonding company. That bonding company was actually from New York. So not only did you have the FBI on the set, but you had a bunch of guys, wearing black clothes with black hats, looking swarthy-looking characters who were on the set, wandering around, keeping an eye on things and supervising things at the behest of the bonding company. So the whole thing turned into a terrible mess. Yeah. So.
But on a positive note, Jeff Bridges, he actually, as a result of a movie here, wind up staying. What was the movie, and there's a unique circumstance?
Yeah, he did. In fact, he's been here for several movies over the years, but he also came out here at first to do a movie called Heaven's Gate, which is this meticulously detailed film about the Johnson County Wars in the 1890s that was filmed up in western Montana by Michael Cimino, who was coming off a successful run with The Deer Hunter, an Oscar-nominated film with The Deer Hunter. And he had been here earlier with Thunderbolt and Lightfoot as well, another Jeff Bridges vehicle. But Jeff ended up living in one of the set pieces, one of the brothels that was deconstructed. He had it deconstructed piece by piece and transported and shipped outside to Livingston, where he lives in today. So Jeff Bridges is actually living in a set piece that was from the movie Heaven's Gate. That's true. Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah. And he probably got to write it off on the movie.
He did. And he also, he was out here. When he came out here originally, he also met his wife out here too, on the set of the first movie he came to film out here, and she was working at Chico Hot Springs. So he has a pretty extensive connection to Montana. And several folks do as well, like Bill Pullman has been out here for several movies, and what you see now, Bill has a place out in Cardwell. So it's not uncommon for people to come out here and have a connection and then form like an affinity or an attachment to Montana and end up staying here and living here afterwards. So
I think Livingston's full of a lot of actors and directors and things.
It is, yeah, and there's some crazy stories, like, Sam Peckinpah, who's known as Bloody Sam, a maverick filmmaker and director. He ended up living in one wing of the Baxter Hotel for a number of years. Yeah, he just kind of became increasingly paranoid, and he ended up living up there in this one wing where he wouldn't come out for about 3 or 4 years. So it's all in the book too. Yeah.
Wow,
so,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
But now, a number of individuals and movies, they went on to quite a lot of recognition, winning awards.
Sure.
What are some of the actors and what are some of the movies?
Sure, A River Runs Through It, obviously, is probably one of the most noted as far as like Oscar recognition and Oscar awards. But we've had several, Runaway Train, Little Big Man, and so we've had other movies that have gone on. What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams, where Montana doubles as heaven, and Robin Williams had the great line about when they asked him about filming out in Glacier. He said that if God wasn't in Glacier, didn't live there, he must have been living nearby or right next door. He did several interviews where he talked about his time in Glacier and filming What Dreams May Come. So.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some new movies that are coming out. They're being filmed right now. Actually, Yellowstone is starting this week, 6/20.
It is. Yellowstone is co-produced by Kevin Costner, and it's directed by Taylor Sheridan, who's found some fame and fortune as a new Western kind of storyteller. He did Sicario, and he also did Hell or High Water, and also did a movie called Wind River. So that's being filmed in Montana at the Chief Joseph Ranch. So Kevin Costner's character, John Dutton, his home in the TV series is the Chief Joseph Ranch. So it's an epic kind of contemporary Western. It's like a big budget theatrical. Look at it, it's almost as if it's like a 10-hour movie that's being filmed just for television. So that will debut on the Paramount Network on June 20th, and there'll be a screening on June 14th. One of the initial screeners in Missoula at the Wilma Theater on June 14th. So that's a production that's going on now. There's another production, a biopic about the Unabomber going on in Lincoln. Ed Harris is looking at taking a film here that could start at the end of the summer up in Great Falls. There's another smaller budgeted film called Mickey and the Bear that's shooting in Anaconda. So what we're seeing too, for the most part, is a lot of smaller kind of budgeted films that are being shot in and around in Montana. But they're still coming, and that's exciting for the state. And there's just a tremendous residual amount as far as like not only financial but cultural and otherwise.
Yeah, well, I know that Canada, a lot of movies are being shot in Canada because they have tremendous tax credits. Colorado offers a 20% tax break, and Wyoming offers a 15%. And recently, one of our legislatures just got rid of our incentives to bring the movie industries to Montana.
Right.
Is Montana spectacular enough that it can stand alone without these breaks, or is it tough competition?
The competition is fierce. You have to want to be here. The incentives are middling or non-existent compared to other states. So there are hotbeds of film right now, in Georgia, New Mexico, and several other places. But all these places offer just tremendous incentives. And if the incentives aren't there, the filmmakers aren't going to come. For example, you have to really want to be here. There was a Western that was shot in Bannock, kind of a neo-Western starring Bill Pullman called The Ballad of Lefty Brown. And the director, he had so many incentives to take the movie north and to take it to Calgary. Calgary also has a very aggressive incentives package, but he wanted to film it in Montana, and they shot it in Bannock Ghost Town, and it translated